Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tevach. I hope you all had a very meaningful and internalized Chag HaShavuos, Zman Matan Teresenu. So, very appropriate as we leave Har Sinai and enter into our daily routines, we continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer HaTanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC and is in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav HaShalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKoyen Katz Olav HaShalom, Rabbi Yael HaKoyen Khan Olav HaShalom. It's also in schus and merit Rabbi Zevi Cheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz, Le'erich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis, for many long, healthy years. So we finished Perek Yud Beis, chapter 12 in Tanya, the first chapter that defines the Beinoni. But let's go over, especially the end, a little more in depth and a little more in detail. So the general gist is this, that the Beinoni is this paradox, which is really the story of our lives. On one hand, we have a struggle, an ongoing struggle. What is defined as the struggle between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Habamis. L'um Yamatz, like he explained in chapter 9, the two kings battling over control over the small city, Erktana Zehaguf. Your body, your faculties. There's a battle going on. Where will these faculties be used? For Kedusha, for serving God, for serving your purpose, aligned with the purpose of your existence, or for self-interest, the animal soul's role. And it's a battle that rages. On the other hand, the Beinoni is not just a victim to the battle, actually has tremendous resources, beginning with the resource of Moyach Shalat Al Alev, self-control, the natural control of the mind over the reflective mind, over the impulsive emotions, which drive self-interest. But it's natural. Tevet tel dose. We're born with it. It's innate, inherent. And that gives the Beinoni the ability to not allow the voice of the animal soul to actualize, to subdue the voice itself completely. No, because the animal soul is active. But it has the power, he has the power to control whether it's going to be actualized, and how is it actualized, either in thought, speech, or action. Which means willingly, the Beinoni does not allow himself to think about anything negative. Not only not how to do it, not only does he not think of how doing it, but not even in general to have a negative thought. And even if inadvertently there's hirhuri avera, like we said, from the three things that a person cannot control themselves, b'chol yem, ein adam nitzel mehem, but that's inadvertent. As soon as he's aware, he pushes away with both hands, as he said, to use the exact had el miyad ba'al yosel l'sham deiche b'shtei yadayim u'masiyach daiti miyad sheniska shu hirara ve'ena makabli berotzen afil l'harbe berotzen. So he pushes it aside, he completely denies it, and diverts his mind to something that is positive, like he said earlier, and especially to something in Kedusha. And definitely he doesn't think about doing it. He also doesn't speak about it and doesn't act on it. So Machshava Dibra Ma'is is in control by the Beinoni. In addition, we learned that he also has an innate Ava Mesoteres, a deep love. But that's innate. Is the Moyach Shalat Alev that allows him to activate and control the animal soul. Then there's an additional piece, that during davening, he has an additional strength. The Shas Meichin the Godless, because it's an expansive time and a special flow of divine energy is flowing into existence. So during davening, when he concentrates, his mind and his heart is directed toward godliness, so then the animal soul is also silenced temporarily. Not just that it's not actualized, it's silenced. Like in the example, you could have the opposing king, the opposition, they could speak, but nevertheless, who controls thought, speech, and action is the divine soul. Well, there's a state where they don't even speak. It's like asleep during davening. But after davening, that recedes, that energy. There is a reshim that remains, that in turn, together with Me'ach Shal Talev and the Ava Mesuteres, gives the Beinoni that edge, should he choose to act on Me'ach Shal Talev, that self-control, the natural power, just like the natural power of light over darkness. A little light dispels darkness naturally, without any effort. But you have to exercise the light, meaning you have to bring the mind, the moyach, into action, so it's control the impulsive heart. So there you have the paradox of the Beinoni. And the last piece of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe applies this all now to also Ben Adam Lechavere. So this you could, Ben Adam Lamokim is regarding thoughts or speech or action that goes against things between God and man. But there's also a whole category in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, which is called Ben Adam Lechavere. So the Alter Rebbe says, V'chein b'dvarim she'ben Adam Lechavere. Just as we said before about any negative thought, he does not, even an inadvertent one, he doesn't willingly embrace or accept it. So he says here too, Miyad she'elo ma'alev la'meich ezatina v'sina chas v'shalom. So now he describes interactions with others, that as soon as it arises from his heart, again, the impulsive emotions to the mind, any tina v'sina, any ill feelings, ill will, or sinna, hatred, God forbid. And then he goes on, or any thoughts of envy, anger, or resentment, and similar to that, like etc. He categorically and altogether and absolutely refuses to embrace in his mind and his will. Both are necessary. Because remember we learned before the Sene Sheba Meiche. There has to be the will. The Me'ach Shal Taleh, without will, without that will being exercised to activate the power, is a power, but you have to activate it. So all these negative feelings, he does not allow himself to in any way embrace it. Even if inadvertently something may arise. So from this it seems that the Hirhure Veda he talked before, that Ein Adam Nitzel Mehen B'chol Yem, includes every Aveda, including a negative thought. Not just a negative thought between man and God. A person has, let's say, machshava zor, a bad thought. But it's not about another person. It's just impure or inappropriate. But here he's saying also that, because he says clearly, Miyad she'elolei mehalev lameich. In other words, it could arise, but he doesn't allow himself to embrace it in any way. As soon as he feels any tinge of that, ain't a makabel klal. Alter Rebbe, however, goes even further, because that already is a big achievement. Imagine a human being is able to control himself to the point that any negative thought you have to another person, you can completely eliminate or completely control. The Alter Rebbe does not suffice with that. And now he adds something. And it may be that this is connected to what he said earlier when he said that he's Masiach Das. Let's just go up just go back to a certain expression. Lasir daite legamri mitayves libe elahepach legamri ubefrat al tzad hakdusha. Alter Rebbe said that earlier. To divert his attention away from his heart's urges entirely to something completely different, and particularly in the direction of holiness, the tzaddik kedusha. So it's one thing, sur mera, you push aside a negative. So the moich shalt alav, the self-control that the Beinoni exercises, has that power. But how far does it go? You could just say, okay, the king of the animal soul in the small city has spoken, and you push aside his opposing voice, the voice of opposition. But we know that we haven't transformed the animal soul. But here the Alter Rebbe says the Beinoni goes even further. So he says, Va'adarab, and on the contrary, Va'adarab, on the contrary, Hamoyach shalut u'meishel beruach shebelibei, the mind controls and dominates shalut u'meishel, shalut u'meishel, the inclination of his heart, beruach shebelibei, the inclination, the spirit of his heart, essentially the impulse of his heart, not just to subdue it, not just to silence it, not just to not act on it, but lasis hehepach mamish. That's why he said earlier, lasir daitel b'tayvus libi ala hepach legamri. So though his mind at that moment can be directed towards something negative, coming from the heart, but no, he pushes it aside, but ala hepach legamri. Hepach legamri means that's not toward anything that's negative. For example, a person, let's say, has a thought, something inappropriate, and instead starts thinking about mathematics, or about some science, or some other neutral idea. So why is that called hepech legamri? Because it's hepech of something that is negative. But then he says, upfarat al tzaddik kedusha, especially towards something holy, because mathematics is not holy. So here he's also saying the same idea now. The other amech shalt alev, lasis a hepech mamish. To do the exact opposite. What's the exact opposite of these negative feelings? Like we said, ill will, hatred, envy, anger, or resentment, is to do a favor, is to do something good to the person. You hear this? Not just enough to not do anything negative, not have any negative feelings. To act in a kind way to this person, that initially he may even had a consideration to have some negative feeling, showing him extra affection. So we see to the extent that the Moich Shal Ta'alev of the Beinoni is not just neutralizing the situation, he's actually directing it toward a positive thing. So even though there was reason, we're not getting at whether it's legitimate or not. We'll soon see, even if it's legitimate, to have a negative feeling, not only does he suppress that, but he actually directs it toward having a positive feeling. Okay. And he continues on just to emphasize the point. Lizbel memenu at ktsei achrin. Tolerating at ktsei achrin to extreme limits. It's a strong statement. V'loi liches chas v'sholem, without becoming angry, God forbid. V'gam shalei l'shayalem le'kefale. So we said before, there's the anger is one of the 5 things he mentioned. So he's tolerating, which means even though there's cause, that person has good reason to be angry, his Moich Shalt Alev has the control not to allow it to be actualized in thought, speech, or action. Even in thought. And he tolerates. And does not get angry, God forbid. And also refrains from repaying this person, the antagonist. Kifole, so-called tit for tat, what he seems to deserve. Because here he did something that would cause anger, that would cause resentment, would cause any negative feeling, and instead he doesn't tolerate it and doesn't show any angry, and Gam Shalein definitely does not repay him in kind. Okay. Okay. Now, some ask the question, once you said that he doesn't get angry, so for sure he's not going to repay him in kind. What is that adding? So there are those that explain that the chiddush with that is that even if the person did something to you that deserves a punishment al pitera, which means not inside your feelings you don't get angry at him, but the Torah says he deserves to be reprimanded. He deserves some type of punishment. So he's saying that you don't get involved as well in that. That's how some explain this addition. But either way, we see here the extent of how the Beinoni self-control mastery goes that far as he exercised that self-control. And finally, he says, Ela adarab, because this is a continuing explanation. Ela adarab ligma l'chayovim tevis. Not only does not he repay him in kind, but ligma l'chayovim tevis, to repay the guilty with positive acts, even though he may be guilty, or he is guilty. This comes from the lashon that we say in Birchas HaGoimel, ligma l'chayovim tevis. So we see here several points. What the self-control and the mastery of the self-control of the Beinoni achieves. He doesn't in any way accept and embrace any negative thoughts about another person. On the contrary, his self-control allows him to do the exact opposite by showing him kindness and extra affection. He tolerates that behavior, even though it's antagonistic behavior. Doesn't get angry at all, and does not repay him in kind. And on the contrary, ligma l'chayovim tevis, which seems very similar, l'snaigim chavere b'midas chesed v'chibi yaseder medasle. That seems to be not a repeat because different language, but what he's adding that is even though he's chayovim, which adds emphasis to what I said before, that even if he's responsible, pitera, that he did something wrong, the antagonist that is, not only don't you repay him in kind, but you actually do kindness to him. So that seems to be what he's adding now. Before, he just said that he behaves and acts kindly toward this person. But there we didn't establish whether the person deserved something, did the person really do something wrong. We're not talking about imagination. But it could be subjectively you feel he insulted you or in some way hurt you. But al pitera, maybe not. Here we're saying he's chayovim. even if he's a person that it may appear that he deserves to be repaid in kind. So that goes even a step further in the extent of how the Beini transforms himself. Which of course it really all captures the idea of that power that a human being has over himself. And here he brings the raya. The last words in this Perek, Kamisha Kosa B'Zayar, like it says in Zayar, Lilmid mi Yosef imechav, to learn from Yosef and his brothers. So, what happened with Yosef and his brothers? We all know the Zohar says they sold him into slavery. They almost killed him, then they sold him into slavery. For 22 years, he was separated from his father, from his family. Yes, he rose to great heights, but that was not due to them. So you would think that they would deserve great punishment for their negative behavior to him. And all these things we said before, tina, vesina, ill will, hatred, I don't know, envy may not apply with Yosef, but anger, kapeda, resentment would apply, and legitimately so. And yet we see, what did Yosef do? Not only is he neutral to them, not only did he not do anything negative in kind, though he had the power to do so. He was the viceroy, he was the Mishnah Lamelech. Instead, Ligmol Chayovim Tevis, what did he do? He told them, it's not you, it's Hashem that sent me here. In other words, he didn't see his misfortune as their hands, even though they did it. He saw this is what God wanted. That was meant to be. As Alter Rebbe explained later in Ageres HaKedesh Simcha Chavei, that ala nizik, kvan nigzeh min hashamayim, the person was hurt, means it was meant to be. Even though the person who did the hurting will be nenash, will be punished for rei b'chiraseh, for his bad choice. But the person is not a victim of the perpetrator. And that's what Yosef told them. Hashem led me here. And what did he do? He fed them, he supported them, he saved their lives, and then brought his father and the rest of the family came down to Mitzrayim. That's the extent that is ligmul l'chayovim tevin, even though they're chayovim. And we see later, indeed in history, by the Asari Arugi Malchus, when the Roman emperor, even though he had it for his own evil intentions, he said, doesn't it say in your Torah that when you kidnap someone, you deserve the death penalty? And the 10 great martyrs sent up the shliach to heaven, B'shmol Kain Gadol, and he came down, yes, that's Kablu Gzeda, that's Gzeda. Yes, they did deserve punishment. Even though there again, the reason of the Roman emperor was for his own evil reasons. And yet Yosef did not get immersed in that. He rose above it all. This is what God did. In order for me to be able to save your lives and to save the world's life during that great famine. And he showed kindness to them. This is the opposite of what you would have expected. So that teaches us about the Beini. Which of course is a tremendous lesson. In addition to the idea of what a Beini is, it's a tremendous lesson in life. Because we'll all go through in life times where something happens to us. Someone does something, and they may do it in a way that is deliberate, and they deserve perhaps to be punished for it. But you, the Beini, frees himself. I'm not your victim. I have a connection with God, and God controls the world. And I am not going to carry any toxic, negative feelings toward another person. And on the contrary, I will show kindness. So it's a lesson in general in life. And with that, the Alter Rebbe concludes Perek Yud Beis. There are so many lessons that can be learned from this chapter, especially from this last piece. Being that we're coming from Matan Torah, from Shavuos, so I'll just share one short thought that applies in that sense. There's a famous Gemara in Shabbos Daf Lamed, where the potential convert comes to Hillel after Shammai rejects him, and he wants to learn the Torah standing on one foot. Shammai says that's not possible. He sends him away. Hillel, on the other hand, says, don't do unto others that you dislike for yourself, that which you don't want done to you. And the rest is commentary. The rest of the Torah is commentary. Go study. Beautiful. The idea of ahavta l'recha kamocha, loving another like we're learning here. But the question is asked, and briefly later in Tanya, chapter 32, okay, Hillel's words are beautiful, but there's a whole part of Torah, ben odom lamokim, not just ben odom l'chavere. How do you say ma'ad olach soni also applies to davening, the laws of tumen tara, purity and impurity, the laws in the Beis Hamikdash, korbanos, Shabbos, Yom Tov, anything between us and God. What does it have to do with not doing, not to do to someone else what you don't like done to you? So the answer the Alter Rebbe gives there is because the whole Torah is about Hagbaras Hatzura ala Chemer, the power of spirit over matter. Moyach shal ta'alev, in the words that he's saying here. He doesn't use those words there. But the idea that your neshama is more powerful than your body. That's the whole Torah. And that's what love is. That's what Ava is. That as long as a person doesn't have that dominance of neshama over body, like in the case the Beinoni is exercising moyach shal ta'alev, to have the moyach, the chochma of nefesh alekis, to naturally control the sichlus, the folly of the animal soul, you can't have true love. So in other words, kol ha'Torah kula, even kashrus and tefillah and everything, is about showing kindness to another person. If a person just keeps ben odom l'chaveri and not ben odom l'mokim and not ben odom l'chaveri, something's missing. Like a novel b'reshus ha'Torah, an obnoxious person with the reshus ha'Torah. Torah is all about refining the person. Which means that even if something happens that another person does, you never personalize it, you're never judgmental, you don't become someone that shows any negative resentment to another. Adarabah, you show him only kindness and love. Even like in a case with Yosef and his brothers, that his brothers did such a thing. The lessons in this are far-reaching and teaches us the idea of how we permeate ourselves. Even if we're not a tzaddik, even a Beinoni has the control. The animal soul is active and saying all kinds of things and provoking us and trying to seduce us. But bottom line is you control whether it will be actualized in thought, speech, and action. And that defines the Beinoni. And that we conclude Perek Yud Beis. And we'll continue Perek Yud Gimel, which continues the theme of the Beinoni. Everyone have a good tavach, a good gebench to yar, a good gebench summer. TanyaApplied.com, where you can find this and previous programs. Thank you.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.